What's up, everyone? We got a special guest for today's video. Mike Renner is joining the show. He is the lead draft analyst at the Messenger, formerly PFF, also the host of Renner Ranks on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mike, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on.
You excited for the Senior Bowl? It's a stacked roster this year.
I'm literally writing it up. I've been writing it up all day because there's so many players, and I'm highlighting like all the ones worthwhile. And there's a ton, man. And I mean, it's because you got 11 underclassmen this year, which has never been the case before. And like all those underclassmen are probably like top 75, top 100 picks. So that obviously helps. But I've never been this excited for a Senior Bowl. So I'm very hyped to get down there next week.
And I even feel like the actual seniors, the list this year is a lot better than it has been in previous years. The one-on-ones are going to be crazy, especially with some of these players that are, there's a lot of unknowns with them based on how they were used or level of competition. So yeah, it should be exciting. This is my first year going. I'm pumped.
The one interesting thing about this Senior Bowl, though, it's like there's no small school guys at this, which is usually like, and that's obviously the way the world with NIL and transfer portal just being like you immediately start whatever. So no one stays at small schools. So, but there's just, I think the days of, guys coming out of D3, D2, FCS, I just think they're over, sadly, for those programs. But there's not a single like top 100 guy there from a real, BYU is probably the smallest program there that's going to have a top 100 pick.
Wasn't Kieran, I forget I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
The Yale tackle.
Like he's injured, but I think he would have been there. If he wasn't, but yeah, man. Either way, I guess that's more wealth that goes to the Shrine Bowl and the other bowls. But in today's video, we're going to be kicking off draft season with some superlatives. We're going to look at the most overrated and underrated players that are maybe not as high on our boards, but just fun to watch. Biggest disappointments based on our expectations from the preseason, and the players that are the most difficult evaluations that, really struggling with going back and forth. And I'll let you kick it off with the most underrated player in the 2024 draft class.
I think a month ago, I would have said Byron Murphy, the Texas DT, but now in Daniel Jeremiah's mock, he's going top 20, and Dane Brugler's mock, he's going top 15. So I think that one people have caught up, and like he's going that high. He's awesome. His tape, the Texas DT is awesome. So I'll say Sione Vaki, the Utah safety / running back. I think this guy, so he's a weird story to begin with. He's only played 2 years of college football. He was 2019 recruiting class and took, I guess, 3 seasons off for a Mormon mission, comes back, immediately sees a role year one. Year two is playing running back and safety for Utah, has like over 150 yards against Cal, has like 150 receiving yards against USC. You flip out his running back tape, and he might be, running back 1 in this draft class. His tape's awesome in terms of his tackle breaking ability. And then on the defense side of the ball, he's such a ferocious tackler that even if in coverage, doesn't have a great frame, he's probably like 5'11", a little over 200 pounds. He's not going to be like a high-end cover corner or cover safety, but the plays that he can make in terms of closing to ball carriers in front of him are really second to none in this draft class. So that's the role of a lot of safeties in today's NFL, right? Like you're allowing catches, and then you just got to wrap up. And there's really no one in this draft class that I would trust to do that more than him. So I think he ends up probably top 75 pick. And I'm excited to see what he can do, because again, 2 years college football is almost it's unprecedented. Like we don't see guys play that little and then get to the NFL, even if he is still 23 years old of age. So I think there's more meat on the bone for what he can be at the next level. So very excited to see how he fares.
I think, didn't you have him as like a first round pick, like in your first board? Are you still that high on him?
I have him as top 40 player. Now, not a first round pick. He's in the mid 30s. I'm trying to think exactly where, but I see him as probably like a guy, just because safety also a position that's kind of devalued. I see him as a guy that if I would, I'd take him second round. I think he's that good.
I felt like when I watched him, I just felt like tackling an open space was the biggest issue I had, kind of some stiffness there. And I kind of question like what his role is. You have to have a very specific idea of how you're going to use him. Like if I knew that I could draft Sion Vaki and just have him like run in a straight line and like just hit people over the middle of the field, I would be good with that. But yeah, that'll be interesting. I need to check out his running back tape. I've only watched him on defense.
It's pretty sweet. It's honestly like he and his like GPS numbers were like over 21 miles an hour for a guy who's like 210 pounds at safety. I don't know. There's a lot to like just about the athlete. So I'm just curious to see how he develops because again, the guys can play a ton of football.
So my most underrated player, honestly, I had way more overrated players that I wanted to kind of talk about. Underrated was kind of tough. Like you said, Byron Murphy definitely would have been mine. We were texting back and forth about Byron Murphy a few months ago, but it seems like everyone's caught on to him. I decided to go with Gabriel Murphy, edge rusher out of UCLA. So Leatu Latu's obviously getting all the attention in this class from that defense, but they actually had two other really productive pass rushers, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, who I believe are twins. I know they're brothers. I prefer Gabriel Murphy. They both, I think, are kind of lack bend. That's really my biggest negative with both of them. But I think that Gabriel Murphy is a little bit more fluid, and he's just a slasher, straight line speed, has a wide range of pass rushing moves, gets into that swim move instantly. And you see that as a pass rusher and in run defense. If a blocker lowers his head into Gabriel Murphy, he's transitioning into that swim move so quickly and just slipping around blocks. And, you know, he was in a very favorable situation in UCLA's defense. Obviously, with how many pass rushers they had, they were just wreaking havoc on the Pac-12 offensive lines. Like I've some of these offensive lines that they were facing, the Colorado game is just tragic. Like I can't imagine Deion Sanders' reaction watching that tape the next day. But I think Gabriel Murphy could be a third round pick and be a productive pass rusher, especially in a stunt heavy defense. And I don't see a lot of people talking about him.
The Murphy brothers are interesting. They've been, I mean, they're highly skilled. Like, I think that's, all the UCLA guys, Latu too, are highly skilled rushers. And because they've been doing it ever since they were at North Texas. They transferred from North Texas to UCLA a couple of years ago. And they just produce. And now they don't look like they should, not look like they should, but like they don't have NFL bodies, and that length is below average. I think height's below average. Twitch wise, in terms of like pure get off is like okay for an NFL edge rusher. Like they're not taking those boxes. That's not why you're talking about them as prospects. But boy, you flip on the tape and they're just like, they make plays. And there's something to that at the end of the day for an edge rusher. So hopefully, I don't know, I'm interested to see how they test out in the pre-draft, because I think that will help a lot for their evaluation of what exactly they could be at the next level.
I feel like Gabriel Murphy at least is going to just teleport in the 40 at least.
I think they'll crush the shuttle. Those guys will kill the shuttle.
Yeah,
they might be 1 and 2, right? They're agile for sure.
All right, so moving on to the most overrated player. Like I said, there was a long list of guys that I wanted to talk about here. I decided to go with Troy Fontenot, tackle that's going to turn guard out of Washington. I feel like I'm being gaslit with Troy Fontenot, just this overwhelming praise. Like I haven't heard one negative word about Fontenot. If you look up any mock draft, he's going to be in between the 20th or 25th pick, almost a guarantee. And I'll talk about what he does well. Like he's really talented with his hands. He's probably the best in this class, I would say, at trapping power rushes. And you see him always trying to get into that snatch trap, even to a fault where like he'll be trying to slap the hands down where it's like, dude, you're already getting pushed back. You need to drop your anchor. But you know, crafty with his hands. He has like a nasty finishing mean streak demeanor. And as a puller, he's got pretty good target location. And like that's where you'll see his highlight run blocks that get posted on Twitter because he'll flatten people out in open space. But about 3 times every tape, and I went through every Washington game because it was annoying me so much. About 3 times every game, he's going to lose to an inside counter. Part of that should be fixed, you know, moving into guard, less space to cover, but you still do have to block two-way goes at guard still. Um, and then to me, what worries me most about Troy Fontenot, honestly, is that I think he's a poor run blocker. I wouldn't want to run like outside zone to his side. He just can't sustain reach blocks, doesn't move his feet well, has very limited range as a run blocker. And so I see him as kind of a quality pass protecting guard, which for me is like a late third type of grade. And man, if I was a fan of a team that drafted Troy Fontenot in the first round, I would be pissed.
I honestly, I had him written down as one of mine to like talk about, but it's just because he's getting such high praise, right? It's not because I don't think he's a good player, and that's why I hate like talking about overrated, underrated. Like I think he's a great player. If you're talking about if no one had said a word about him, you know, maybe I call him underrated because I think he offers a lot, and like you said, I think he has a high floor and pass protection at the next level, which you know, it's a starting guard, right? So I think you're getting a starting guard with him. It's just he's not that strong. And for a guy going from tackle to guard, that's a concern. You know, like that. That's not where you want to have strength concerns. Is trying to block, you know, 300 plus pounders when you're on the outside, the collegiate level, blocking 240 pounders. And they, like you hit the nail on the head. He doesn't sustain blocks well in the run game, which is kind of a big deal in the interior. That's like all it is can you hold up? Your positioning doesn't really matter as much as like can you get a guy to not separate off your block? And so yeah, I just wouldn't draft that guy in the first. It's just not the juice ain't worth the squeeze, especially in this this class that has a lot of other high impact positions, a lot of other talented dudes. I just think he's a guy I'd love to have, like you said, top of the third, somewhere around that range, and you feel good about it. But pick 20, oof, I saw him pick 16 in DJ's mock, and I was just like, man, that's just what's he going to do for you? Right? You know, like how much impact is he going to make on your roster?
I wonder if it's like the entire NFL just loves him, or maybe there's just one team that just really likes him,
gassing him up.
Yeah, and so they're like, well, he's gonna go in the first round. I don't know. I don't get it with Troy Fontenot. Who's your overrated player?
My biggest overrated player right now, compared to where I've seen him go and where he is on my board, which is not even a top 100 player right now, is Devontae Walker, the North Carolina wide receiver. He's fast. Okay, he's 6'2", 200. He's probably going to run mid 4.3s. He has speed. But there's two things I worry about with him. One is just like he's on the older side. He's a senior. Was not productive until his junior year, third year of college. I believe he started at community college, then goes to Kent State, then North Carolina. So an interesting track. But when I see fast wide receivers and when I see guys who are like, supposed deep threats at the NFL level, the biggest thing I want to know is how well can they throttle down and stop on a 10-yard hitch route? Because if you can't do that within 2 or 3 yards, you're just going to get, people are going to sit over the top of you all day long in the NFL. And then once they see you throttling down, they're going to come up and they're going to make plays on you because you give it away that you're stopping in a hurry. And that's just something that basically doesn't get talked about in this process. People ooh and awe over the fact that they can run by college corners. But in the NFL, they have scouting reports. They know that this guy is fast. They're going to sit over the top of you. And they are fast themselves at corner in the NFL. So I think he's a one-trick pony in that regard, and that he's going to be, he's going to join the long list of, the Tyquan Thorntons of the world, guys in that mold who get wildly overdrafted because they're fast and turn into guys who, maybe average 20 yards a catch for their career, but then get like 20 to 30 receptions a season. So I would not take him in the first round. And I've seen him in multiple first round mocks at this point. And that's just, I don't think it's worth the risk.
It's funny. I had my my low end comp for Devontae Walker was Tyquan Thornton. My high end comp is Josh Palmer. Like that's really what I think. The curls, it's almost like I think there is tightness in his hips, but it's almost like he's not even trying to sink his hips when he runs curl routes. He just kind of like stumbles for a while and then drifts backwards. The other thing is he gives you nothing after the catch. He broke 2 tackles in 2023, 2.8 yak per reception. So yeah, you've got someone that can run past college corners, and like he did beat Nate Wiggins down the sideline. But you combine that with a lot of focus drops, flashes of some nice contested catch skills, but that wasn't really consistent on his tape. I watched like the last 3 games of his season. That's what I watched first of his, and like those were his 3 worst games. So I was super low on Devontae Walker, like 6th or 7th round, because I hadn't like heard about the hype or anything. And then I watched some earlier games and I'm like, okay, I could see this guy maybe late day 2, but yeah, that's another one that was honestly, that was the second guy that I really wanted to mention it if you weren't going to mention him, but yeah, I don't get it with him. I got an honorable mention, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I feel like that might just be name recognition. I don't know. I mean, he's a solid player, but like I'm seeing him as a consensus like top 40 guy on big boards.
Oof, I didn't see that, but that's too high for me.
Yeah.
And he's also, I mean, I doubt he goes there, right? Like he's 6 foot, listed at 6 foot, which he doesn't have long arms. Like he's not obviously lanky at that size. So Ivan Pace was in that same range with, in my opinion, arguably better tape, and goes undrafted. So it's just like I don't think the NFL is going to covet him top 40. It's just they don't do that with 6 foot linebackers.
He's Jeremiah Trotter. I have him at 49th on the consensus board. I think that's kind of like a Henry Toe situation from last year, where it's just like holdover.
It's a guy it's a name you recognize. Toto was like the name you immediately you hear it and you're like, okay, yeah, I know that guy. And he goes to Alabama. Yeah, of course he's going to be good, right? So I think that's Jeremiah Trotter Jr. You know Jeremiah Trotter. He has to be good, right?
It's just like immediate creation. You got spots to fill out on your big board. Mm-hmm. All right. So next segment is fun to watch. A reference back to 2 for 1 Drafts podcast, what the PFF podcast that Mike used to do with Austin Gale. One of my favorite parts about that podcast is how they would call out a lot of the lazy cliches that everyone in draft media space uses. 10-year starter for a stocky white center is a classic one. Another one is,
it sounds like one.
Another one is saying that a player's fun to watch because it's like a non-take. It's just, I have a fun time watching pretty much everyone. I like watching football, so like everyone's fun to watch for me, but it tells you nothing. But with that being said, there are some players that maybe kind of have a limited upside or limited role in the NFL, but their tape is just extremely fun. So who's your most enjoyable watch from this draft class?
I wanted to go, I think you even said don't go like the top guys, because the top of this draft class, like Malik Neighbors to me is the most fun to watch guy in this class. He's unbelievable, just as what he can do athletically, the LSU wide receiver. So from a guy further down the board for me, I think Peyton Wilson from NC State's tape is awesome to watch. It's probably some of the most fun I've had watching collegiate linebackers since Reuben Foster coming out of Alabama, who was just an animal. But Wilson's kind of the same. Like he hits violently, and like he hits with clotheslines. He comes in with his whole body. Like he puts his body on the line consistently. And by the way, he runs like a 4.4. Like the guy has unbelievable top end speed. He tracks down wide receivers. They lined him up, as an edge, as a slot in between the tackles. He's done a lot of the things you'd see him do at the NFL level. And I think he did it all at a high level. And so when I watch Peyton Wilson's tape, NC State linebacker, I'm just I just hope that guy can stay healthy, because when he is, he's fun to watch, man. And he plays the game how, you kind of want every linebacker to play the game.
He has so many plays where initially he's off of the end zone angle, and then you like let the play run, and the running back gets like 4 yards downfield, and he just comes flying
He's
in
in there.
from
Yep.
the side. Like uh, a few of those every game. So yeah, I'm with you on Peyton Wilson. I have another linebacker that's on my fun to watch list, and it's actually someone that plays safety, but it's James Williams for the Miami Hurricanes. Former top 10 recruit, I believe. He's like 6'4", 210 pounds. Arms, hands dragging on the ground, just super long arms. Has that kind of drawing the blank on the Jaron Curse has that kind of like frame and build, and that's sort of the role that I project him in the NFL. And he's just one of the most violent, oppressive players in college football. A punishing hitter over the middle of the field. There were multiple occurrences on his tape where he would get targeted and just lay a huge hit. The receiver would be laying on the ground for a couple seconds, and then either the next play or a couple plays after that, that same receiver would get targeted again on him, and they had a focus drop because he was like crashing down, and they were worried about getting hit. And he's gotten a ton of like late hit, unnecessary roughness penalties. Sometimes it's always hard to tell on the all 22 with like flags and stuff. Lose some context there, but no, he gets penalized a lot, and his coverage ability, like projecting him as a safety, is just extremely limited. I think he has good range for a linebacker, but he's not someone that I want like covering sideline to sideline or anything. And some of the most pathetic tackling attempts, like the stiffness in open space, is just like I the first couple games I watched, I think were like two of his better games, and I was like, oh, this could be a dude. And then like I started to see him try to break down an open space, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not going to fly. So yeah, he's more of like a late third to fourth round pick for me, but him and Cam Kitchens, like the Miami safety duo, they lead college football in things that happen per snap. Like there's always something going on with them, good or bad. But yeah,
they were roller coaster, man. And Williams, I think you asked me about him, or we talked about him earlier this year, and I was like, just hopefully he's not in space. I think what I said, something like that. It's just like,
yeah, you said he has
in
to play
space
linebacker, and I was like, oh yeah, linebacker.
And so on the Senior Bowl roster, he's listed as linebacker.
Yeah, I
so
saw that.
He will be playing linebacker, and he has to. Like that's he's too tall. I mean, like there's a reason why Kyle Hamilton is like one of the only ones to ever be able to make that transition to the NFL at that size, just because you got to play in space. You got to move laterally. You got to move different directions and safety than you do at linebacker. And so I'm interested to see. I think he has a lot riding on his Senior Bowl performance because of that. And his linebacker is massively different what you're asked to do than safety. So the talent's obviously there, but he was, like you said, like up and down. Some plays just look checked out. Some plays look locked in and wanted to kill dude. So definitely a fun to watch player.
And I mean, I feel like he has at least the starting point for a linebacker skill set. Like it's not starting at square one. Like he can shed blocks and stuff. And even though he is kind of limited in coverage, like there's still some good instincts there and vision, I guess, even if he isn't perfectly assignment secure. But yeah, pretty volatile player. Definitely definition of a boom bust. All right, so moving on to the biggest disappointment. So the player heading into the year that I had the highest hopes or expectations for, and just didn't live up to it. So I don't do a ton of pre-scouting of like the upcoming class. I'm usually pretty laser focused on the current class, but occasionally guys do pop off the screen. And last year, watching Penn State defense, it was impossible to ignore Kalen King. Even with as much as I liked Joey Porter Jr.'s tape and some parts of Jair Brown's tape. So I was really excited to watch Kalen King this year. Thought, you know, he was a consensus first round pick in the top 10 of a lot of people's boards in the preseason. And he has that terrible, disastrous matchup against Marvin Harrison Jr. At that point, I hadn't watched any of his other tape, so I'm like, okay, I'll give you that. We've seen this before. The classic example is AJ Terrell versus Jamar Chase. He just gets cooked, and then they both end up being great players. But then you watch the rest of Kalen King's tape this year, and it's not good at all. Like, there are, to me, I thought, very few redeeming qualities about his tape. And if I didn't have the 2022 season in my mind with Kalen King, like, and I'm only looking at this year's tape, he would probably get an undrafted grade from me. The biggest thing that stands out is just super jumpy and press. Like, it's really easy to create separation at the line of scrimmage. If you give just a simple jab step to the outside, he's bouncing backwards 3 or 4 yards. You know, gives up separation at the route break. He gets really influenced by pressure steps, head fakes, and like 5'11", 190, I think is what he's listed at. Doesn't really have the physicality to deal with you know, stronger route runners. And then not very assignment secure in like zone and match coverage. He's got his eyes in the backfield. He'll lose track of switch releases, double moves, misses a lot of tackles. You know, I thought he had a good game against Michigan State, but I don't know. It's, you know, those kind of evaluations where the penultimate year is like a lot better than the final year are always difficult to know how NFL teams are going to view it. And that's, you know, that's where interview process is really important. But I was pretty disappointed with Kalen King's tape this year.
No, I was as well. I was high on him too. You know, coming in this year, I thought it was, I don't want to say a lock first rounder, but this tape was good enough that if he just came close to that, I thought he was pretty much going to be penciled in the first rounder. And like I say, he did not come close. I don't think, you know, that I don't think that talent went away. Yeah, I still think that he can become a highline corner. And obviously he's going to the Senior Bowl, gets a more, probably like a, you know, more isolated test than a week to week sample for him to see if he can like redeem himself. But yeah, he's not going to be a first rounder anymore. And that ship has unfortunately sailed. My guy, I'm going to stay in the secondary. Although I will say his teammate Chop Robinson was one of my list of guys who I thought was pretty disappointing this year, in that I just don't think he took a next step in his development. But Kalen Bullock, I think, was the guy who I had. Kalen Bullock and Cam Kinchins, honestly, those two safeties, I watched them going into this year. So I watched the sophomore tape pretty in depth. And I was like, these could be top 15 picks at safety. You know, these guys could be Kyle Hamilton's or Derwin James's or Jamal Adams. Like, they could be talked about in that era. I think that's how talented those two guys are, how easily they move on the back end. They're just smooth athletes, can do a lot of different things. Kinchins just busted a bunch of covers this year. I think he just got like pick happy, trying to make plays to get to the NFL. I'm not as worried about him, but Bullock is just soft against the run. He's just a stick, man. He didn't put on any muscle seemingly from his sophomore year. He's still 6'3", 190. And if he's trying to take on a bigger back in space or someone who's strong, which is going to be pretty much everyone in the NFL, I mean, he just gets bodied. Like, he's just a skinny dude. And so I guess the thing is, I just, maybe from expectations of thinking those guys could be top 15 picks, and Bullock especially just didn't take that next step in his development physically to put him into that sort of era. I still think the talent's off the charts. Like, he moves like a, you know, off guard in the NBA, and just how graceful he is in the wingspan, and just how he can cover in the back end. And it still has value. But in today's NFL, if your safety can't tackle, you're behind the 8 ball. That's a lot of what they're asked to do in a lot of defenses. It's just that, you know, they're almost placeholders in terms of their coverage ability a lot of times. So I do worry about that. Still, guy I think can be successful at the next level, but definitely disappointed me this year.
Yeah, I was surprised that Kalen Bullock didn't return to school because like some of the stuff that he put on tape would almost have him off of my draft board if I was a team. Like you can't have a safety that's that skinny and also takes bad tackling angles and like yeah, I mean the coverage fluidity and movement skills are really good, but like he's still a prospect to be an NFL draft prospect to me, if that makes sense. Like um
Yeah.
with Cam Kitchens, it's the coverage busts and then also so many safeties in this class that just aren't good tacklers. That the tackling with Cam Kitchens was also really concerning with me. Um, but yeah, with him, it's like there's at least I feel like more elite high end level plays that I would be willing to take a chance on him like second or third round. But I have Kalen Bullock as more of a fourth rounder. Um, yeah, I
Understandable.
doesn't
Very
have
understandable,
doesn't really
honestly,
have the
based on tape.
size.
Yeah.
All right. Last section is the most difficult evaluation for this class. For me, the player that I'm struggling with, just as far as coming up with a final grade, is Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. And I think that NFL teams might have an easier time, ranking him on their board because they know what scheme they're running. But, as someone that's ranking these players kind of agnostic to the scheme, uh, it's kind of difficult because he played, I think, they said the stat. I was listening to NFL Stock Exchange. They said 8.5% of his snaps over the last 2 years were in press coverage. And you watch his tape, basically the only time that he's ever in press is when he absolutely has to be, just based on down and distance, like if it's goal line or third and short or something. And when he's in press, it's not even really, he's not even really playing press coverage. He's just like grabbing and holding on, gets stacked pretty instantly. And he's someone who was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Apparently he's going to run in the 4.3s. But I feel like it's concerning to me when you have this elite corner that's really productive and he can't, like, they don't trust him to play press coverage in the MAC. I know there are obviously schemes that are going to play more or less press coverage, but there's kind of a limit to how much of a lockdown corner you can be if you're giving 7 yards of cushion every snap. So like if he goes to a scheme like Arizona or Houston where they're just playing off quarters every snap, I think he could be really productive. But the Senior Bowl is going to be huge for him, getting those one-on-one reps. But like if you've got someone that you can't trust in press coverage, it's hard for me to take that in the first round.
I'm a fan of just the athlete, but I only dove into a couple of games because just small schoolers, I want to see them at the Senior Bowl first. I want like pretty much like my opinion of them to be shaped versus the best competition. I don't want to say first and foremost, but like that should carry the most weight is how they fare down at the Senior Bowl. And then you go back and watch the tape so you can see, how that looked against lesser competition. But the biggest thing, you hit the nail on the head there, is like he played off, and then the way he was able to play was that he's so strong that he can collision guys in a way that you can't do in the NFL with legal contact rules. And when he collisions guys, like he's so much stronger than the receivers he was going against. That it just like that's how he ended plays was just by being someone that other receivers couldn't run through. And while I think it was to the degree that he's still going to be a tough matchup for smaller wide receivers. Like he's still going to get the physically better of those guys. But I don't know if he's going to do that against like the DK Metcalf, AJ Browns of the world. No one does the NFL level. So I am very curious to see how he fares in the Senior Bowl. That will be massive for his eval. If he goes down there, and again, if you're not playing press as a scheme, you're not practicing press either at Toledo. Like it's not, you're not doing that then in practice. So needs the reps. He's probably been doing that for the past handful of weeks.
The other corner would play press though. It's the weird thing. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
But so we'll see. I'm excited to see how he does. My most difficult eval, outside of the quarterbacks, obviously quarterbacks are always difficult. I think J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix in this year's class are probably the two most difficult from my watch their tape. But that's, those are always going to be the case. I think Jonah Ellis, the Utah defensive end, to me is the most difficult eval that I've gone back and forth on for two big reasons. One is that, at 6'2", he does not have the length of prototypical edge prospect. And now there's a lot of guys getting it done who don't have length. TJ Watt doesn't have long arms. Like, that's kind of the mold he's going to have to be in, is that kind of edge bender at the NFL level, the speed rusher at the NFL level. But he really didn't do much of that in college. Like, he was not a pure get to the edge guy, rip back to the quarterback, finish the play. He was more twitch, lateral agility, spin move, that sort of thing, push pull. Like, he could do those things. And he's super skilled. Dad's the D-line coach there at Utah. So he's obviously been coached since he was a child in terms of, rushing the passer, and can do that probably, and like has that at a high level. But kind of what you said about Kalen Bullock, in that he was a prospect before prospect, like, Ellis just shouldn't have come out. He's too skinny still. Like, I look at his tape and he's just not the size of an NFL rusher yet. He's 246 pounds. He came to Utah 210 pounds. Like, one more year, if he's, continues on a trajectory of getting bigger into the 250s, then we can talk. But right now, you're projecting a guy who needs to add a lot in terms of just body mass, in terms of muscle mass, to make an impact at the next level. So he's one that I just wish he would have come back. I would have felt better about the grade I'd have on him if I got another year of tape with him. But really, in 1 year of productive tape, it's hard to go to bat for him any higher than like end of the second, top of the third right now. And that's like me loving what I saw on tape for the most part, but it's just the physical ability just is not what you want to see for an NFL edge right now.
I felt he's someone that when I watched like my initial first two games, I had a really high grade on him. But then as you watch more, you kind of see the problems. It's his level of play is very dependent on the level of competition that he's facing. One thing I've learned is this, the UCLA left tackle, Bruno Fina, like, he is out there to fool you. He has a 15.8 PFF pass blocking grade on the season. Multiple times this year, I've been watching
the Kingmaker.
I've been watching an edge rusher prospect, and I've been like, oh, this dude's legit. And then, like, after a few times, I was like, all right, I need to look up this UCLA tackle that I keep seeing getting worse. He's like the worst pass blocker in college football. So that was the first Jonah Ellis game I watched. But then, like, Jonah Monheim from USC, I thought kind of shut him down. I see, like, ideally as kind of an Alex Highsmith type of player. But yeah, it'll be big to see like what his testing's like, because you're right, he doesn't really win the edge that consistently. But yeah, I know he was a guy that a lot of people were really high on. I think Trevor Sikkema, I think I listened to like you and Trevor Sikkema maybe early in the season talking about him as like a top 5 edge. And then I watched that UCLA game and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the next guy. And then the rest of the tape wasn't as impressive.
Yeah, I still like I said, I like the player. I just, right now, he's just not there physically. And that's a fact of life. And I don't want to say he got bad advice, because obviously he's going to make millions of dollars next year. Because he still will be probably like a top 100 pick, but he could have been way higher, I think, if he really came back to school and really spent some time in the weight room. So unfortunately, but that's why he's the hardest one to vow.
With this class, there might not even be such a thing as declaring too early, because it like the top 10 is great this year, and then it drops off really quickly as far as depth goes.
I think you get to about 50, and then after 50, you're like, oh, and I'd say like there's just guys. It's not deep. It's top heavy, but it is loaded at the top. I'd be doing my best if I had a lot of day 3 picks to be trying to flip those to get up draft boards for sure.
Yeah. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I will probably see you in Mobile.
For sure, dude.